class. We are going to get started as more people will be joining us, I'm sure. It's great to see people from all across the country here today. Welcome to this segment of GRT's Quick Bites, 20-minute topics in early learning. Today is Read With Me, inviting children into the reading experience. And I am Melody Garcia, that's me in the middle. I'm one of the early literacy librarians with Growing Readers Together, which is an initiative of the Colorado State Library. And we're focused on connecting informal caregivers with resources and early learning opportunities through their local public library. Now, a little background on the project, especially with what's happening right now, Colorado, like most of the country, is facing a child care crisis. Now, prior to the pandemic, it was estimated that about 57% of children under 6 were cared for informally by family members, friends, and neighbors, what we refer to as FFN caregivers. But now, as child care facilities close or reduce their capacity, it is these informal caregivers who are stepping in to fill the gap, many without prior experience or professional resources. Growing Readers Together prioritizes library service to these FFNs in our communities. And over the past 3 years, participating libraries have connected with this group and expanded their early literacy knowledge and access. Now, quite likely, these informal caregivers are already library users, because the public library is perfectly situated to support early learning, particularly for children in informal care. It's our hope that by making early literacy intentional, transparent, and accessible in all Colorado libraries, every child can have access to early learning opportunities, regardless of their care situation. And today we're going to look at one way you can do that by enhancing the impact of your story time when you intentionally invite children to read with you. Now, the idea of this quick bite stemmed from a conversation we were having about the new Colorado State campaign, Read With Me. And I'll actually put that in the chat box if you want to learn more about our Read With Me campaign. But we started discussing the subtle but impactful difference between reading with a child versus reading to a child. So when we're reading with children, we're asking questions throughout the story and having a conversation with children about the book. We are making them feel like readers. How children learn language and literacy skills has been the focus of ongoing research for years. And many of these studies suggest that merely reading books aloud is not sufficient for accelerating children's oral vocabulary development and listening comprehension. Instead, the way books are shared with children matters. When we are reading with a child, we are engaging and involving them in the reading process, making them feel like readers, and modeling the very same reading strategies that all successful readers use. Most importantly, we're engaging in a serve and return relationship. And this has been proven to be the most successful way for children to learn and engage. So I want to take a moment to define serve and return because it is so critical to brain building and serves as a model for what we want reading with children to look like. Serve and return is a child-centered, responsive conversation. And it can be both verbal or nonverbal, depending on the age of the child. But this serve and return builds baby brains. Now, if you look at this diagram from Simple Interactions, you can apply this to a lot of our story times. Sometimes I'm focused on the book, but the child is focused on anything else, like the first image. Other times, both of us are focused on the book. But what we really want is this third diagram. Because if we're practicing serve and return while sharing stories, not only do I hope to turn the child's focus onto the book, but I want to turn my focus onto the child. This means that when we ask these open-ended questions while reading, we give the children the time and attention they need to feel heard. We can then respond and expand on the ideas that they shared. And even though most of us are doing our story times virtually right now, that doesn't mean that we have to disregard this idea. You can still do this if you're presenting virtual story time with no live audience on a recording or a Zoom audience on mute. In fact, depending on your audience, a lot of these children are actually primed for this sort of questioning. Because if you've watched children's programming lately, things like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood do this. The characters stop and direct questions to the children in the audience, pause and respond. A few tips that I found is, really giving it that long pause. It's hard to wait when you don't see the children, but giving that 5 to second pause to let their brains process that this question is for me, how can I answer? Encourage them to shout it out. I saw a great presenter who, was doing a national program, but she said, shout it out so I can hear you all the way in Virginia. I was like, that's beautiful. And then making those inclusive responses. Oh, great idea. Oh, so many of my friends, saw the banana, and you can plan these responses to make it feel like they were heard, that you are responding and returning the serve, even if you don't actually have them in the room. Now, some of this might already sound familiar to you if you have experience with dialogic reading, because dialogic reading is a formula for how to have a conversation about a book. And this formal strategy includes a process for questioning, which is the PEER acronym: prompt, evaluate, expand, and repeat. So you want to ask that question, take time to really hear what the child has said, expand, add vocabulary, show that we are having a responsive relationship, and repeating it back to the child. We also have our crowd question prompts. We're asking completion questions, recall, open-ended. Our W's, what, when, who, where, why. Distancing is the background knowledge and making those personal connections. But when I sat down to plan this presentation, I was reminded of why it took me so long to embrace dialogic reading. Personally, I have always felt overwhelmed by the formal dialogic reading approach. This always felt something that was for teachers and not necessarily for me. And yet over the years, I have come to embrace the questioning approach to reading. Though when I turned back to looking at PEER and crowd, I felt those old feelings. And so I decided to step away from this from this formula and instead look at how I approach this method of questioning. And hopefully what I'm going to share with you today is really, it's these same ideas repackaged in a way that I hope will be a little bit more accessible, both to staff and the caregivers. And what we're going to do today is look at how to find opportunities to wonder together, tell the story together, and read the words together. When you read with a child, you can invite them to wonder with you. I am in love lately with the word wonder. It puts me in the curious mindset of a child, and I encourage you to use it more when talking with children. When we wonder, we really set the stage for children to contribute and share without any pressure to know the right answer, which is perfect for open-ended questions. Now, as we dig into these techniques, we're going to be using pages from this year's One Book Colorado winner, The Little Red Fort by Brenda Mayer, for my examples. And I encourage you to share in the chat any questions that come to your mind that you might ask about this book or that you frequently use when reading with children. So when we talk about an open-ended question, we're looking beyond yes or no answers or things that have just one right answer. So if we were reading about Ruby and her brothers, we might say, I wonder how Ruby is feeling. We can ask those who, what, when, where, why questions. I wonder what she's planning to build. We can explore the pictures, take a little bit closer look at what's going on back there. Her brothers say that they're too busy to help, but I wonder, what are her brothers busy doing? And making those connections, making it personal. Have you ever had to ask for help? I wonder, how would you feel if no one would help you? And there are so many ways that we can just wonder about what's going on the page. And the truth is that this is what's happening in the back of our minds as we read as successful readers as well. We can also invite children to tell the story with us. Especially if you're reading a story that has a strong narrative arc, we want to ask questions that encourage children to tell that story along with you. And these questions really get to the core skills that children need as independent readers to understand a story. Can they remember and understand what's already occurred? Can they use that information and logic to guess what will happen next? Do they know how to look for clues from the pictures to help their understanding? So when we practice recall, we don't want to wait till the end of the book. We want to make this happen throughout the story, especially for younger children. Remembering what happened all the way at the beginning can be a challenge. So if we do this throughout the story, we're really scaffolding and structuring this approach so that they can be successful. So we might say, let's think. What did her brothers say the last time she asked for help? And then making predictions based on what we know. What do you think they're going to say this time? Or what do you think Ruby will do now? We can also look a little bit deeper at the pictures for clues about that as well. Let's look at Ruby's face. Does she look ready to give up? What do you think she might be thinking? And we can even encourage children to read the words together and really feel like successful readers by helping them complete rhymes or chime in with repetitive phrases. Again, we want to prepare kids to be successful. So if we're going to be completing rhymes, really stress those rhyming words and even slowly start to sound out the word to give them a lot of opportunity to guess correctly. Rhyming is hard and it takes a lot of practice, but it's key to being ready to read. Choral reading can be a very accessible way into reading. Anytime you have a book that has those repetitive phrases, again, setting kids up for it, really stressing that, you can even let them know, this phrase is going to be said again and again through the book, and I need you to help me read it. All right, let's try it all together. Can you shout it out? And she did. It's also really important to support new vocabulary as we read. And this can be done very directly by just inserting those short definitions, asking kids, Ruby felt delighted. You ever heard the word delighted before? Let's look at the pictures. What might that mean? Or even just using your voice and gestures as you read. Ruby was delighted. And it really helps kids grasp what that new word could be. Also, a wonderful opportunity to point to the text as you read, which even has its own set of research on how that really helps kids become successful readers. Now, a lot of these examples were really geared towards an older toddler and preschool crowd. But these techniques belong in every story time, even toddler time and baby lap 6. We just need to adjust the questions to fit with the stories we read and match our expectations with the audience. With babies and toddlers, don't expect a verbal answer. But that doesn't mean we can't hold space and leave that empty pause there for a child's thinking to happen. So much more is going on internally with babies and toddlers. And we're also teaching this practice to caregivers. And as they do it, as the child grows, they might be surprised when they do get an answer. A lot of the stories we read with babies and toddlers also lack that narrative arc. So changing your questions to be more of like, oh, what does the cat say? I wonder, I've never seen a purple cat. What color is your cat? But if we do have a really simple or familiar narrative, they can chime in with that, especially if repetitive things are happening. And of course, we can read the words together with caregivers, letting them join in with that choral reading, because they're getting those practices, they're getting those techniques in that we're hoping will continue as they grow. Because no matter how much great work we do in the library, what really matters is what we're teaching caregivers to bring back home. We want to invite caregivers to join in with the magic and have so that everyone reading with a child at home has these strategies. A well-placed and sincere early literacy tip is how we can do that. Really making sure that you share these tips directly before or after your reading really helps caregivers catch on to what you're modeling. So as we read this story, look for what we're going to do. Or you may have noticed when we were reading, I stopped to ask questions. And choose one specific type of questioning to feature each time you do this. You notice how we really stop to explain the vocabulary words. We're going to let kids join in with the reading and guess the words. Let them know specifically, even if you're doing lots of different things in your reading, what's the one that you want caregivers to catch on and try at home? And let them know you can do this at home. This isn't something that's just for story time. And reinforce that positive impact on language. Why are we doing this? So it could sound something like, as we read the story, look for the way we pause to let the children guess the rhyming word. You can do this at home. A knowledge of rhyming words has been linked to reading success. And then go through and model that. And you might even want to reinforce it afterwards. Like, not everyone got this, and that's okay. Rhyming is hard. But the more you practice at home, the easier this will be for your child. And so we have a few minutes left if anyone has any questions about what we've talked about or any tips on how they insert questions and invite children to read along with them in their story times. Or how that experience is going when without the audience in front of you. It can be uncomfortable to do this virtually and really holding that space for children's questions. I'm going to try and practice what I preach and hold a little space here. See if any questions pop up in the chat. And I want to point out to everyone that on that left-hand column, there is a PDF handout that has just a lot of the things that we talked about today in an easy reference sheet, as well as some links to further developing your understanding of dialogic reading and interactive reading with children. And I do see someone type in, so I'm going to let that come up. Now this is the first of our fall series, Quick Bites. So we are going to invite you to join us again next Tuesday as well. And one link that I forgot to pop in was we shared that slide from simple interactions on serve and return, and what they refer to as reciprocity. And it is a really fabulous initiative. If you haven't heard of simple interactions, you can check them out there as well. So upcoming next week on just Tuesday, December 15th, we've got grandparents as informal caregivers. And Gail Yerbeck will be joining us for that one. And then December 22nd, following Tuesday, STEM with Toddlers. Yes, you can, with Kate Brenner. All these quick bites are in the archive. We've been doing these for a while now and have a lot of little 20-minute insights into early literacy, so you can always check us out on the archive, share that with any colleagues that weren't able to join us today. And we welcome your input. If you have a second to take a survey, we really do look those over, and we're always improving as we go through our professional development offerings. And thank you so much for joining us today. And we do have some conversation in the chat here. Sorry, that sped by me. Yeah, the holding space. Yeah, I love that idea. I can't take credit for that phrase, but it's one that's really stuck with me. Thank you all so much.